the State of Detroit Lions are they're still a team that can compete. They're still a team that can make a playoff run. The path, and you'll get into the path, but their path to the playoffs or their path to a high seed in the playoffs is more difficult now with these losses. The schedule doesn't look as easy as it did weeks ago. Like there are teams, especially going up against NFC North teams, that are going to play this team hard. We saw the Packers bring their A game yesterday. The Vikings, we got 2 more against the Vikings. What is it? One against the Bears,
Cowboys,
and then Denver.
Saints.
Denver's on the way up. The Cowboys are good, and we got the Saints. So the path there is not easy, but this team still has the ability. I do worry about the defense. I worry about the defensive line mostly. I worry about their cornerback depth. I like their secondary as a whole, but their cornerback depth really worries me.
Yeah.
Especially because it's paired with that defensive line. There's not one of the two that are elite enough to sort of balance out any deficiencies. The defensive line isn't getting pressure, which leaves the cornerbacks exposed. Cornerbacks aren't elite lockdown cornerbacks, so even when they're locking the guys down, the quarterback just has way too much time. Nobody can hold them. So my thing, I'm still very optimistic about this season. The Jared Goff conversation, I know we're hitting on everything right now. Jared Goff conversation, which we're going to have next. It's a different conversation to me. A playoff run, this team currently, how it's built versus a contract extension. 2 completely different conversations. I still am with Jared Goff. This is a bad week. And yes, I said week. These are 2 horrible games in 4 or 5 days.
Yeah,
it's not the Jared Goff we've seen over his whole sample size. We'll say we'll start in 2022. He's been playing well. These turnovers, it is a little bit of the old Goff, but that means there was an old Goff and there's a new Goff. So I still have faith in him behind this offensive line.
Yeah, and I see comments about the Goff thing. We do have a Goff section next, but like, just breaking down this team, like this was a team that's supposed to be competing. They're going to win their division, right? They're going to go win the division. So. They're probably going to win 12 or 13 games. I want to go over some things here real quick, Broder. I want to look at some contending teams that people think are contenders, whether it's this year or last year, and kind of go like a stretch of football that they've had. Because at the end of the day, the Lions have played a bad stretch of football, correct, for 3 games?
Yes.
Can we all agree on that in the room?
I would say 4.
4 games. What was the record in that 4 games?
3-1.
3-1. Okay, and like,
love it.
Contending teams have played bad football for 2-3 game stretches this year, and they have lost those games. The Baltimore Ravens, they lost 2 of 3 at one point when they had their bad stretch of football. The Chiefs right now, the Kansas City Chiefs, they've lost 2 of their last 3 games. And I know the context around it, like they do have players, they have things, but I'm just putting things in perspective here. The 49ers at one point this year, obviously with guys hurt, Debo, Trent Williams, but at one point this year when they were trying to figure things out, Brock Purdy was playing terrible, threw a pick in the fourth quarter almost in every one of those games, and had 3 straight losses. The Cowboys, they've lost 2 games in 3 weeks. And when they lost to the Cardinals, then within that 3-week stretch, they lost another game. The Eagles, they've played ugly football in the last couple weeks. Have they not? The last 2, I know they played against the Chiefs.
At the beginning of the season. The last half.
They've played in
the
7.
The first half of the season, they were really shaky. The last half, they've been really solid.
Well, the last half, they won 2 one-possession games the last 2 weeks. They've had 7 one-possession games this year alone.
You can watch offensively. The Eagles are a different team, though. They were struggling offensively. This is what's the most important part of them. Their secondary looks a little suspect, which is why they're kind of like But they just got Kevin Byard in that offense right now. Like Jalen Hurts, even with a bad knee right now, is rolling.
Okay.
That's why it's like Philly at the beginning of the season you would have had me, but the wins that they've had, I don't think you can say.
And I want to go back to the last 2 years. 2 years ago, the Bengals when they went to the Super Bowl versus the Rams.
Yeah.
Let's talk about both of those teams and the seasons that both of those teams had. Bengals lost 7 games that year, and to end the year, they went 3-3 before they went to the playoffs. The Rams, they lost 3 straight games in the Super Bowl season that they won to the Titans and the Packers. 3 straight.
Can I counter?
And you can counter all you want, but and I get there's different. Every single one of these teams, there's different reasons on why they have different players that are great. They have different reasons. Everything has a reason. The Lions right now, they're going through a bad stretch of football, and it needs to be addressed at the end of the day, right? Like I think that's the biggest point we all have to take away is it has to be addressed. The thing, what's going to happen is if it's not addressed, season's going to just plateau, right? Mm-hmm. If it gets addressed by Dan Campbell, the season will be fine. They're going to win the division. They're going to have a chance to win the playoff game. And the Booner path that we've talked about, that will still be alive because they addressed it. And when you address something like that, what happens? You only get better. you end up getting better and growing. You Lucas, you talked to me a lot in regards to getting that playoff experience. I know it's not playoff experience, but when you go through a stretch like this, that's when you start getting some experience to where it's, hey, you do have a young team. You're going to lose games. You're going to go through a bad stretch. This is the perfect time. I would rather have this right now than go through this in December and January.
That's very
So
true.
What's happening right now, we can overreact all we want, but if Dan Campbell responds to this, Jared Goff responds to it, AG responds to it, that's where things start. You start, like we talked about this process, a 3-year process, right? This is when the thing starts happening to where you finally have that team. At some point, you're going to have bad weeks, bad stretches, and you start learning. That's how you grow out a franchise that wins games consistently, as you go through these stretches and you learn from them. A lot of those teams I've named off, they've had bad stretches this year, and they're learning from them. They end up, and I know like the 49ers, they had that bad stretch. Guess what they did? Added Chase Young, got their players back. Different for the Detroit Lions. Dan Campbell has to do it a different way. He can't go get Chase Young. Brad Holmes didn't do it. But at the end of the day, get Jonah Jackson back, address the offensive line, go address the defensive line. Maybe Bruce Irvin will spark a light under some of the core. I'm not saying he's going to do it, but I'm just saying it's going to spark a little fire under some guys and say, hey, listen, maybe you guys need to step up because he's won a Super Bowl. Yeah. He knows what it takes. And that's my point with this whole thing is I'm not going to sit here and as a fan, a listener, easy, whoever you are, if you want to hop off now when they're still trying to build and they're still a young football team, because we all will admit that, but we won't admit that they can still go out there and change things. Because guess what Dan Campbell did last year when they were 1-6? He went and he addressed what was wrong, he figured out what was wrong, and they finished the season 8-2. So now this is that bad stretch of football. Luckily for the Detroit Lions, it's not 1-6.
Yeah.
It's 3-1, and you played terrible football and still went 3-1. Now you address what you had to address last year. You change a couple things around, you learn from it, and then you go finish that 8-2 football like you did last season.
Yeah.
But this whole thing of like Dan Campbell, like and shout out to Spenny, but he was like, oh the vibes. Like Dan keeps saying it, we have the players. But listen, the vibes, that is what's gotten this football team to 8-3. That is what finished last year 8-2. And Lucas, you can give me that look all you want. That is it though. The Dan Campbell mentality, the way he's changed the program and the whole organization with that grit, that is the vibes.
My thing is I'm not concerned about the Lions getting.
I'm dying over here, by the way.
The Lions are going to win the division. I'm not panicking about that. The Lions, I still think, are going to win a playoff game. But in my opinion, obviously this is opinion, vibes can only get you so far in this league when there's teams that have elite talent that when they're winning games, that creates vibe. Like Philly, they got vibes.
They do,
San
and they
Francisco,
win.
They got vibes. Dallas,
can I
they
ask
got
you this?
vibes. Detroit, they have vibes.
What's the reason if you don't have the vibe? Like Dan Campbell, that's his thing, right? People love him, right? Why would you say we don't want the vibes, we want the players when you can have both?
Because I'm not saying that, but where I'm the panic, where I think for a lot of Lions fans is now that when you got to go up against those teams, I think that it's more easily to be exposed now if you're the Lions. Like I think the weaknesses are shown, and I think a lot of the things, yes, they can come with coaching, but it goes just back to that fundamental personnel.
Yeah.
Back to what the Lions do against mid teams and okay teams. What you guys do good, we do great. And I think there's a couple teams around the NFC that can kind of do that with the Lions, and that's why I'm worried. I don't think the Lions are a bad team. I don't think anybody needs fired right now. I think people need to step up, coaching and personnel-wise. But I just think that it's not a Lions Super Bowl year, and that's okay. That's at the end of the day, that's okay, because what you want to come into this season was win the division, win a playoff game. I still think those things are going to happen, but it's just disappointing after yesterday because the vibes, quote unquote, were surrounding potential Super Bowl, and I just think now it's clear that it's not this year.